Over 1.5 billion people tuned in to watch France play Argentina in the 2022 World Cup final, making it one of the most watched sporting events in history. Football has the power to make the world stand still, stop wars and influence geopolitics. I used to love playing football as a kid. Some of my happiest memories till this day are goals that I scored in my youth. Growing up in Manchester in the 90s, I idolised David Beckham and hoped one day to replicate his trademark free kicks. Unfortunately, I lack the talent threshold for the Premier League, but I am good at uncovering the past. So in today's video, we are going to be looking at the history of football and how it was shaped by class conflict, community pride, and one pivotal FA Cup that changed the game forever. For more content like this, please like and subscribe. All right, let's kick off. So, football in some form or other has been around for thousands of years. The ancient Greeks, Romans, Chinese and even the Aztecs, there has been many variations that in some form have enough similarities to modern football that we can at least compare them. However, there are too many major differences that for the sake of time we simply cannot go into in this video. Modern football as we know it today originated in England. Little is known about the actual origins, but we know that by the 9th century, villages in England were playing a game referred to as mob football. Mob football matches were large and unregulated games, usually between two rival villages. The objective of the game was to get the football, which was usually made from a sheep's bladder covered in leather, to the marker in the other team's village. The game was known to be incredibly violent, with players using wrestling moves and even full-on fighting each other. The football could be kicked or picked up and carried, and this is where we need to talk about football's brother, rugby. You see, mob football was the original game that both football and rugby came from. So there was kicking and a goal, but there was also carrying and violence. Something tells me that Neymar would not have been considered a £1 billion football player back then. Mob football was typically played on festival days or special occasions, such as Shrove Tuesday, and it often caused significant disruption, including damage to property. In fact, it became so unruly that it was repeatedly banned by various monarchs, including King Edward II in 1314. Despite the constant bans, football continued in some form or other over the centuries. It seems people could not get enough of the sport, as in a world before the internet, it provided bragging rights over the next town over. We beat them last year, we are the champions. The pride the players could get if they were the ones who scored the winning goal was more overpowering than the governmental interference. Football was freedom. Football is the beautiful game. By the 19th century, private schools in England like Eton, Harrow and Rugby, yes, that's where the name comes from, aren't you clever? Football was now made part of the school curriculum and rules were established. Each school played football with different rules. So rugby fans, I'm sorry, this is where I have to leave you. Please like and subscribe on your way out. Okay, so basically Eton and Harrow joined forces, negotiated the rules and formed the Football Association. And rugby thought nah and just did their own thing. So football, which has started in local villages throughout the country, had now been gentrified by what we English refer to as posh people. Posh people are people in England who have access to private education. Football was now seen as a gentleman's game. Mob behaviour was not prohibited, unless you went to rugby. But that would all change in 1878 when James Jardine, a mill owner in Darwin, paid Scottish team Patrick £10 for Fergus Suter and James Lowe. This was the first transfer in football history, and it was the first step in the fight back for the working classes in England. The transfer of Suter and Love was the beginning of football as a professional game. You don't need to be rich to play football. In fact, you could now be paid. You could become a professional football player. Back then, there was no Premier League. The FA Cup was the only football trophy in the world at the time. In the second round of the FA Cup in 1879, the Old Etonians, 2 times finalists, came up against a small team of mostly mill workers from Darwin. The Old Etonians were not worried at all. After all, They were not tired from working a 14-hour shift in a mill, and they had eaten well this morning. Shockingly, in probably the biggest upset in football history, against all odds, Darwin held the Old Etonians to a 5-5 draw. This match sent shockwaves across the country. The working classes had proven themselves against all odds. However, when word of Suter and Love being paid to play football reached the Old Etonians, they were furious. Payment for playing football was seen as a betrayal of the sport's gentlemanly spirit, and the elites were determined to stamp it out. The Old Etonians corruptly used their influence to insist the second match be played on their home ground again, a massive advantage and an incredibly malicious tactic from so-called gentlemen. They also arranged the match to be played after the mill workers had finished working a 14-hour shift. The exhausted mill workers were defeated 6-2, but the damage was done. The working class teams had proven they could compete with the best. The Old Etonians and their allies in the Football Association began to push back hard against professionalism in the game. They accused Darwin of corrupting the sport with money. The irony. They demanded stricter enforcement of FA rules and even tried to disqualify teams they suspected of paying players. But no amount of rule changing or corruption could stop what was coming. The working class teams had shown that they could not only compete but thrive, and this marked the beginning of football's transformation into the professional global phenomenon that we know today. In 1883, Blackburn Olympic defeated the Old Etonians 2-1 to become the first working class team to win the FA Cup final. The posh teams have never won it since. So there you have it, the history of football. It started off as two villages in England in the 9th century kicking the living hell out of each other, to private schools across the country gentrifying the sport, back to the working classes, to being perfected by Manchester United. Thank you for watching today's video. If you like the video, for the love of football, give me a like and subscribe. Come on, just do it. It's like scoring a goal. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.